All right. We are live. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to my occasionally weekly uh, ranting complain stream. It's Sunday evening, and tonight's topic is about being a man with soft hands and the burden that carries. I'm a man with soft hands. I've received criticism for having soft hands and compliments for having soft hands. We'll get into that in a little bit. But first, one thing that I wanted to follow up on is last week I went on a little bit of a rant about how much I love corporate restaurants. Chain restaurants, corporate restaurants, whatever you want to call them. I'm coming out to the world and sharing my love with the community for my love for corporate restaurants. I'm not an advocate of supporting small business anymore because small business just continues to disappoint me time after time. And a lot of that is because of the lack of variety in tacos that are available in restaurants nowadays, where every taco that you get is a street style, authentic taco. They all taste the same. But what happens when I go out and all I want are just good white people tacos? Well, white people tacos are becoming increasingly more difficult to come by. And this is where my love of corporate restaurants comes into place. Because if you want to go out and get good white people tacos, you go to a corporate restaurant. I was thinking about maybe getting Chipotle this weekend, and I look over the menu, and sure enough, their tacos, they have the hard shell, but they don't have the ground meat. Instead, it needs to be something that's over seasoned. There's too much variety. Um, they're not real tacos. They're just whatever they are. It's I don't like them. I don't like them. But when I was thinking about how much I love corporate restaurants, then I started to think about corporate restaurants of yesteryear. And one of my favorite restaurants as a kid was the Ground Round. And I think the Ground Round existed. There was a weird history with the Ground Round. Um, I think it was unique mostly to the Midwest, going back to the 80s, 90s, whenever. And then they all shut down, but then reopened on the East Coast, maybe like 10 years later. It was really bizarre. But the thing about the Ground Round, back when I was a kid and when they first started popping up, was it was one of those places where they would bring you a basket of peanuts and you could throw all the shells on the floor. I never really quite understood the excitement about that. There was something about it. It's unusual. I've been to a few places in the past where they bring out the basket of peanuts in the shell and you crack them open and everybody just throws them on the floor. And what's weird about that is when you go into the place, now you're stepping in these piles of peanut shells that I'm sure nowadays is a health code violation of some sort. I just can't imagine where, in this society that we live in, of where everyone's looking for a lawsuit and where regulations are, everything is overregulated and everyone is looking for an opportunity to file a lawsuit, that being allowed to basically throw edible food onto the floor, and there are big piles of it all over the place, that would be considered acceptable by modern standards. But I miss that, though. I miss that. And that's what the early Ground Round was like. You could go in, and I remember they had really good burgers, and you could go in and they'd bring you the peanuts and you were allowed to throw the peanut shells on the floor. Um, and I saw recently that Chi Chi's is making a comeback. This really surprised me. Chi Chi's, anyone who's not familiar with Chi Chi's, was a corporate chain of American Mexican food. And what's great about that is that white people tacos all over the menu. Everything, just page after page after page of white people tacos. Excellent stuff. And then Chi Chi's at some point, I guess the store, the restaurants weren't doing well for whatever reason. Maybe foodie culture had something to do with that. And Chi Chi's has only existed in name only as salsa that you can buy in the store. But however, I guess someone bought the rights to the brand, and the Chi Chi's are reopening. I believe there's a new one in Michigan. I can't remember, maybe somewhere outside of Detroit. And so there's hope. There's hope that I can go out and I can get good American Mexican food and not have to go to a Taco Bell or like there's I'm eager when a Chi Chi's opens up in my area, I'll be one of the first people there, when they at the ribbon cutting ceremony, waiting to get in and to place an order for tacos, fajitas, nachos, whatever, with like an extra tall margarita, something like that. So I'm really looking forward to Chi Chi's opening up. And then another corporate restaurant that I was thinking about, Bennigan's. Anyone remember Bennigan's? Again, it was another like burger pub type of place. They had really good burgers, I remember, but they also had appetizers galore, where you could get deep fried mushrooms, deep fried zucchini, cheese curds, things like that. And I believe Bennigan's is making a comeback as well. So I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe all of a sudden we'll see this boom of all of these old corporate chains just popping up again. Ground Round, Chi Chi's, Bennigan's. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that because I love corporate restaurants and I no longer support small business and I don't support mom and pop restaurants anymore. Strictly corporate restaurants. That's all I eat now, are just at corporate restaurants. We have a few people in the chat here. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. Pumping Vinyl, thanks for tuning into the show. And you should VC model Mark Lastman. Oh, yeah. Okay. So Lastman's hands are quite soft. I wonder what moisturizer he uses. Well, you know what? My hands are soft from birth. I don't need to use moisturizer. Uh, I have soft hands because of a lack of manual labor in my profession and my upbringing. But I'll get into that in a little bit. But trust me, I've gotten plenty of criticism about my soft hands and plenty of compliments about it too. So that's what it's like being a man with soft hands. One thing that I was thinking about recently that I talk about is my history in stand-up comedy and how unsuccessful I have been at stand-up comedy. And I was going through some old videos, and I thought what I would do is go to a video of some examples of things you don't want to do if you want to try to become a successful stand-up comedian. And I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here. And I have videos going way back. Now, this is one thing you'll notice about this video. I'm probably about 40 pounds lighter. I have a full head of hair, which is something that I complain about quite frequently about not having a full head of hair anymore. Um, and I'm let me see here. So there was this a bit that I did with a sock puppet. And oh boy, let me just get the So I have this learning disability. And because of my learning disability, whenever I see an abbreviation, I get really confused and all of these crazy thoughts race through my mind of what it could mean, and I just can't concentrate on anything. Okay, so I'm having a meltdown on stage right there while also wearing a gay cowboy shirt. I don't know what was going through my head at the time, but I was watching. I guess I don't know why I owned a gay cowboy shirt. I wasn't gay, still not gay, and also not a cowboy. But just at the time, I felt a gay cowboy shirt is what was necessary. Also, notice this full head of hair, not very stylish, but still more than what I have today. All right. And one that just stumps me every time that I see it is BJ. Anytime I see the letters B and J, I just get aroused and I can't stop thinking about how much I love a good BJ. There's nothing I love more than a BJ that makes my eyes roll back into my head because boy, oh boy, do I love beef jerky. All right, so a little bit of a word play there. Something that I still enjoy wordplay really nowadays. A little bit of a wordsmith. Um, Let me see here. All right. Just call me Slim Jim, cause I love a good BJ. Another one that just stumps me every time that I see it is S&M. Anytime I'm looking for a video to rent and the category I come across is called S&M, I start to sweat. And I just can't stop thinking about how much I obsess over S&M. I can't maintain a stable relationship because of my obsession with S&M, because boy, oh boy, do I love spaghetti and meatballs. Just call me Chef Boyardee, because I love S&M a little too much. Okay, getting dark. Getting kind of dark there, but now here's the in comedy you usually will do in a setup. It'll be a series of 3 is what they call it, and you progressively get hit harder as you know. Here's your first punchline, your second punchline, and then your finishing punchline. Another abbreviation that just blows my mind every time that I see it is PCP. Anytime I'm reading the newspaper and the headline that I see says PCP, I start to twitch. And I relapse. And I steal money out of my mother's purse so I can buy more PCP. My every thought and emotion is dictated by my unrelenting addiction to PCP, because boy, oh boy, do I love pepperoni and cheese pizza. I blame Papa John for my crippling addiction to PCP with garlic sauce. All right, so right there, another thing too about the gay cowboy shirt. Had the top button undone showing a little bit of chest hair. So yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. Gay cowboy shirt. It's a little bit of chest hair popping out of it. But I was thinner and I guess just more comfortable with my look, my appearance at the time. My resume consists of an array of failed business ventures.
that have left me traumatized and drowning in debt. I manufactured and distributed my own line of latex condoms, but we never sold a single package because the instructions for use on the back of the box said, Step 1, try sweet-talking her into letting you pull out. It's a lot better that way.
That is true. Pulling out is better. Condoms kind of suck, but they're necessary. Yeah. All right. And yeah. So, hold on. Let me go here.
I opened a nursing home to care for our beloved senior citizens. But we never got any residents because on opening day, the one-way sign by the entrance to the driveway was pointing to the ground.
We love the elderly here on sloppy Sundays. We love the elderly. So just remember that. Not all of the elderly, not all of them. Far from it, but we love the elderly here. And I hope that everyone can hear the audio, by the way. I'm not completely sure if I'm using StreamYards the right way, but I hope that you can hear the audio. Let's see.
The bank declined my small business loan application for my startup electric company called White Power.
All right. Fast forward a bit. I did get the double laugh there. Now, there is a thing in comedy called the double laugh. And the double laugh is when the crowd is responding well and they're laughing out loud, but then they laugh out loud again. It's called a double laugh, and it's a good thing because it's the crowd is genuinely feeling your material. Still not successful though.
So I had a crushing reality check the other day when I discovered I'm not as sophisticated as I like to think I am. Because my favorite beverage in the whole wide world is tap water. You know me, most people are like, oh, I love a bottle of red wine or a tall, delicious bottle of Mad Dog. I'll take a kitchen sink, thank you very much. I would be lying to myself if I ever denied craving a cool and refreshing glass of bathroom sink water. You know me, at the house party, I'm the guy hanging out by the kitchen sink all night long. Ask me what I brought to the party, and my response is, not even a stack of dirty dishes can keep me from a tall, delicious glass of tap water.
So, believe it or not, I have more material about drinking tap water too. So, yeah, okay. So, smart move to preface the set with the learning disability disclaimer. This could have been a rough one. Oh, it was rough. Trust me, it was rough. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now the sock puppet. This is where things get really rough. The sock puppet.
You're right, Chris.
Everything you said about them before is true. They are ugly. And stupid, too.
Gee, Jimmy, that's not a nice thing to say. Why are you so chipper today?
I guess you could say I'm a happy sock.
Wait a second, Jimmy. Have you been sniffing gasoline again? Jimmy, I thought you were going to quit sniffing gasoline.
I was, but the price for 93 Premium is the cheapest it's been in years.
Gee, Jimmy, I didn't know the different types matter.
You bet. The other reason I was going to quit is because I got sick of doing 87 unleaded.
Okay, that was terrible. That was.
Gee, Jimmy, that's great that you have such a wonderful sense of humor about your gasoline addiction. I wish I did too. You must really enjoy comedy. Who's your favorite comic?
You know, Dice.
Dice who?
The Dice Man.
The Dice Man? Tell me one of his jokes and maybe I'll remember who he is.
Do you want to hear one of the Dice Man's jokes?
He did all those nasty riddles, right?
All right, here we go. The Dice Man. Hickory dickory dock. Give me some lettuce to chop. I dice tomatoes. I dice carrots too. I dice the best salad on the whole fucking block. Oh!
Thanks.
All right, so that was the whole sock puppet bit. I came up with that whole idea the night before that show. I think the Dice Man. The way that when I started thinking about it is I came up with the Dice Man rhyme, like how Andrew Dice Clay used to do those dirty nursery rhymes. But then I thought about like, well, what if I did a dirty nursery rhyme, but about something boring, like making a salad? And then how could I fit that into the set? Well, how about I use a sock puppet? And yeah, so I still have that sock puppet, by the way. Yeah, he's maybe I'll dust him off and you know, dig out the old naughty salad nursery rhymes or whatever. But yeah, I have a bunch of other videos that maybe I'll dissect in a future date. Many of them, I'm thinner and have a full head of hair. But yeah, so and then also soft hands. Now, here's the thing about soft hands, and I've talked about having soft hands before, and there are two types of men in this world: men who have soft hands, and then men who have calloused working man's hands. That's really what it all comes down to. I have soft hands, but when I've met men who have calloused, scarred, grease-stained working man's hands, there's this thing of like going in for the handshake because just a little bit of background about the working man's hands is Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi's riff that he hit all started because he lost a fingertip on a bandsaw. It's always a bandsaw accident when someone loses a fingertip, but then because of that he became a music legend. All from having losing his fingertip in an accident with a saw. My hands, I've mostly just have been typing most of my life and using a mouse. So when I was younger, I used to do manual labor. Um, I had to do all the yard work in my house growing up, all of that. But then because I hated doing that, then that made me rebel against the whole idea of manual labor because I hated it as a kid. So I swore it off, and I'm like, I'm never doing manual labor. I hate this, and blah blah blah. And but when I've met guys who, the guys who have the rugged man hands, where they're calloused and they're scarred and they've lost a fingertip and they love to do like the firm handshake. And I've had this happen to me before where there's a guy like that. He goes in for the handshake. He goes in for the firm handshake too. And I'm kind of like, oh, like this. But then they'll grab your hand in the handshake and then they squeeze your hand. And I had this guy one time tell me, he's like, oh, those are some soft hands there. And I'm like, But then at the same time too, I was dating a girl once who loved my soft hands. She she was like, we were holding hands and she was like, oh, your hands are so soft. Oh, and she was all like sparkly eyed and all of that. So it's something about having soft hands. I just, yeah, I don't know. I've rarely in my adult life have I swung a hammer or used a saw or a drill press or anything like that. I've just been at a desk, typing and using a mouse, and that's it. So, but yeah, that's my whole thing. Like my hands are soft where, yeah, I don't know. I forgot where I was going with that, but it's really not that interesting. Anyways, well, what? Uh, Now, Jason Rojas is Satan. Is that, yeah, preface with the learning disability. Yeah, that whole type of material. When I was younger, my stand-up comedy was heavily influenced by Stephen Wright, who is one of my all-time favorite comedians. But the problem with doing Stephen Wright type of material is that it becomes obvious very quickly that you're just trying to do Stephen Wright type of material. I saw, and he's sort of is known as the comedian who is best known for the surreal deadpan delivery of one-liners, very surreal, where it's just like outer space. But a comedian who really started that style, who just happened to be in the news recently, is Jackie Vernon. And I saw there was a headline just recently, like this week, that Jackie Vernon, who the original Frosty the Snowman cartoon, the animated show from, I think it was from like the 50s or the 60s that, they always play during Christmas time every year. He did the voice for Frosty the Snowman. And on the shows, people have only been calling Jackie Vernon, the guy who was the voice of Frosty the Snowman. No one has made a single mention of the fact that he was really the original comedian, stand-up comic, who created that whole surreal, deadpan, one-liner style of material. Jackie Vernon was one, and dark too. I have a couple records of his dark material that he would come up with, where he had jokes about suicide back in the 1950s and 60s, and that type of content, people didn't cover stuff like that really, or at least anyone who would get any coverage on TV or anything like that. But Jackie Vernon could get very dark. And it was revealed, oh yeah, going back to how his name made the headlines recently, is it was discovered that he was living like a double life, where he was married and had kids, but then it turns out he was married to like 3 or 4 other women and had families with them, and the families didn't know about it. Like, it was just somehow discovered that he's had probably 3 or 4 wives and then had kids with all of those women. I just can't imagine what it's like having. I mean, I've never been married, but I can't imagine. I had a pretty stressful childhood, and having one wife I think would be enough. But having 4 of them just nagging at you all the time, like taking out the trash, pick up your clothes. Uh, we need to go to my mother's house for dinner. Things like that. Like, why would a guy want to do that to himself? And your kids, okay, sure. Like, if you have kids and they turn out to be good kids, then I'm sure there's a reward for that. But if you have all these kids, what happens with the kids who kind of turn out and they just kind of suck as people? Like, maybe they're in and out of jail, or they only call you whenever they need money, things like that. But yeah, dude, I think maybe Jackie Vernon could have better cued his pull-out technique to prevent from having all those kids, and not to mention all the child support that you would pay for all of that. But yeah, so yeah, that was just interesting. Anyone who's if you're interested in checking out some stand-up material, go on YouTube. I'm sure there are clips there of the Dick Clark show and Johnny Carson, things like that with Jackie Vernon. It sort of like when it comes to the surreal deadpan one-liner type of delivery, there was him, Stephen Wright, and then Mitch Hedberg. And I have mixed feelings about Mitch Hedberg, because Mitch Hedberg also was surreal one-liner, deadpan, but he was really just stoner jokes, like stoner one-liners. And some of it was good, but then other stuff too was kind of just like, but if you were in that headspace at the time, I'm sure it was hilarious, because Mitch Hedberg did have some really funny material. And if crazy story about Mitch Hedberg is a buddy of mine and we had tickets to see him live, and he died like the night before we were supposed to see him perform. It was crazy. I remember the two of us, we were driving in my buddy's car, and we heard on the radio that Mitch Hedberg, I think he was found dead in a hotel room. On the radio, heard the broadcast, Mitch Hedberg was dead, when we were making plans because we had tickets to see him the following night at, I forget what comedy club it was. But yeah, that's not really important. And then we still ended up going to the comedy club the next day, because what the club did is they had a tribute to Mitch Hedberg, and it was, they had like a projection screen on stage, and they would play old clips of him doing stand-up and things like that. So yeah, that was Mitch Hedberg. I know that there are other comedians who've made an attempt at that style of stand-up. It's just real hit or miss if it's good, because it's really the moment a comedian tries that style of delivery, you're really just imitating one of the originators of that material, and it's usually Stephen Wright. Everyone's just like, oh, he's just trying to be like Stephen Wright. Dimitri Martin is another one who I remember tries to do the whole deadpan surreal one-liner thing, but he's also kind of too smart. Like, you don't need to fit too many big words into stand-up. Don't make the audience have to think too much. Just make them laugh. Don't make them have to sit here and think about what does that word mean, or what's the context of the joke, things like that. Anyways, what do we have here? All right, so we're right up at about 35 minutes, which is right where I try to keep it. I will be at a record show next week in St. Louis. So I'm not sure if I will be back in time to do a sloppy Sunday next week. Maybe I might go live in the car and do a ride along and rant and complain in the car. Something like that. But yeah, if anyone is in the St. Louis area, there's a record show going on somewhere around there. I forget what the name of it is. It's like a Czechoslovakian banquet hall or something like that. That's where it's being held. Czechoslovakian banquet halls. Those are definitely a relic of the past. Like they're not opening any new Czechoslovakian banquet halls anymore, or Armenian banquet halls. What the Polish American banquet halls? Like here in Chicago, Chicago was known for having a huge Polish and Czech population, and I think a lot of that has really shrunk or has moved out into the suburbs. But there's still buildings, relics of the past that still have signage up that say like Polish American Community Center, Armenian Banquet Hall, Czechoslovakian Banquet Hall, things like that. So the record show in St. Louis is at a Czechoslovakian. That's how you definitely know it's old, is when it's Czechoslovakian or banquet hall of some sort, or community center. And so yeah, I'll be there next Sunday, and maybe I might pick up some vinyl. We'll see. The outrageous prices. I'm telling you, the prices for records are just getting insane. Getting absolutely insane. What's the I was at a record show a couple weeks ago, and there was this guy who had Ozzy Osbourne Japanese pressings, and the price tag was $325 for Bark at the Moon, for a sealed Japanese press. I didn't check to see what pressing it was or anything like that. I just saw the $325 and I put it back. And then he came up to me and he was like, "Oh, you could have that for $200." Like, I'm good. And then he was boasting about how, like, "Oh, I sold one for $400 right after he died." And I'm like, I don't care. I'm glad that I already owned most all of these, before Ozzy died. But yeah, the prices are getting ridiculous. I'm glad that I was a collector before the vinyl boom happened, because I remember the days when you could go to a record store and there were just $8 records were like used and they were like $8. And or you buy two, get one for free. And nowadays, one thing I hate the most is you go to a record show and you're like, "Oh, what's the price for this?" And then the guy selling it gets on his phone and goes right to Discogs and then makes up a price. Some insane prices that I saw there, but then also reasonable prices too. Like I just picked up everyone knows I talk about Black Sabbath and how I like Technical Ecstasy. So this is just a North American Warner Brothers press, an OG. I got it for $15. The jacket, the vinyl's clean. The jacket, it's a little faded. It's old. It's 40. It's almost 50 years old. For $15. There was another guy selling the Vertigo, the UK press of this, for $70. And yeah, so I don't know what he was doing was, the Discogs price for the Vertigo is like $35, but then shipping for that would be $25. So he's just doubling the price. I don't know, whatever. But all right, everyone, thank you for tuning in. And I may or may not be here next week, but maybe I'll do a car rant and I can complain about people driving. Have a good night.